Scenario 2, it's $141 or $142,000. That will be left at the end of the year. Subtracting out funds that will need to be transferred to other funds, we will be starting 2012 in the two different scenarios in two different positions. In 2012, in Scenario A, the balance forward will be $180,000, and in Scenario 2, it's $100,000. So thank you for letting me drone on about the differences there between the two scenarios. At the core of the decision we need to make tonight is whether we increase, because I think I felt some unanimity about utilizing the $200,000 out of the operating reserve fund to start the year. But I think the difference we need to talk about tonight is whether we want to have a $2 million increase this year and to get an additional $86,867, which in Scenario A, or 1, really drops to that bottom line and provides next year with a better start. In Scenario 2, we are moving into next year basically where we are today. And, you know, I've been thinking about this and doing a lot of spreadsheet work over the weekend. And I think both scenarios have their merits, and both scenarios, you know, have their cons. I think in Scenario 1, and Bob, feel free to chime in here. I think Scenario 1, as I said, you know, that $2 million increase this year will get us started next year in a better spot. In Scenario 2, we'll be essentially in the same spot as we are next year. We have some projections about what the revenues and expenditure increases are next year, but they are just projections and assumptions. But we'll be in a similar spot, actually in both scenarios, this time next year. But next year we'll have, in one scenario, a little bit more dollars than this year, than the other scenario. So I think it comes down to a fundamental question of, are we going to look at 2011 as a year to hold on tight and manage our expenses as much as we can, see if there's if our assumptions hold into next year, and really to ask the question, is this the year to have a tax increase? Yes or no? And that's where we are. That's where we are with those two scenarios. Questions? And that may have not been clear. Probably wasn't clear for a lot of people. But you know, this is the decision phase in the committee. Discussion?
Hey, Gerard, is it unfair to break that 2 mils down into a per capita?
Thank you, Dennis.
You didn't feed
That's something I
question.
forgot.
Okay.
Yeah. Perfect. So what does that $2 million increase mean, right?
Yeah.
So based upon the assessment of the borough, and I think Pat told me this, the average home in the borough would, and this is also good to put this perspective of this tax in compared to the rest of the taxes that we face as taxpayers. The average taxpayer would be facing about a $90 increase. So right now that 6 mils, which is what our tax rate is today, is about $270 for an average home of $45,000 assessment. and that would translate to a $90 increase in a year. So the overall Newtown borough tax would be $360, and compare that to what that $45,000 assessed house will be taxed for the county is $987. For the school, it is $4,858. So you see that
To put that in actual dollars and cents,
When the-
it's about $150,000. Put that in dollars and cents terms coming to the borough, it's about $150,000. Our real estate tax take is about $150,000 total.
total. That's
Total.
what I said
Yeah.
in my intro, yeah.
Total. So it's, you know.
It's a
I think
small
there's
part
a-
of our overall revenue coming in.
But it's, from a real estate tax standpoint, the amount of revenue the borough receives pales in comparison to what goes to Bucks County.
Right.
So if you just do the math and go by the old census, it would be about $35 a person. Just, if you took that 86,000 and just divided it by 2,400, you come out to $35 each. So, okay.
Yeah, thanks. Good question. Yes, anything, Bob?
Well, I think the only thing I would add is we will be depleting the operating reserve in the next 2 years. $200,000 is not going to be replaced. It'll be gone. This time next year, we won't have $618,000. We'll have less than $618,000 next year. And if we have to do the same thing next year, it'll be even lower at the end of 2013.
That-
I mean, we will be drawing down from that if we don't take some kind of action in the next 1 to 2 years.
That's correct, and that's also a great point. And would you agree with me that in either scenario, it's likely we'll be, if our assumptions hold up, like we have on this paper, that we'll have to look at that operating reserve fund again next year, in both scenarios?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's a good point. So this time next year, that operating reserve fund will be $400,000. So
But that's in either scenario. We still.
that's in either scenario.
And then it looks to me like regardless of which scenario you follow, we're taking a similar chunk out at the end of next year. Or into, well, the 2012 budget will require taking out a chunk of the operating budget, or the reserve again next year.
It would require less in scenario 1 than in scenario 2, probably.
About $100,000 less, right?
Right.
So are you done?
No, go ahead.
The other question I have is and first of all, thank you for doing this, Gerard and Bob and Pat, because it's been, for the first go-around for me, it's been an unbelievable education, and you guys have done a great job with it, so thank you. The one question I do have, in 2012, the fund balance, so you're saying in scenario 1's $180,000, if everything, I realize it's not an exact science, versus $100,000, but the fund balance in 2012 that we would then carry forward, is that number correct, where it would only be $2,000? That would be pushing forward to 2013 and minus $159,000 in 2013?
That is correct.
So I realize it's not an exact number. Okay, so again, then it would be almost a 4 mil coverage in 2013. In mills, if we had depleted the operating or that fund, that inter-fund operating transfer, just in that number alone in 2013.